Hi guys, I'm Freya. I'm a hairstylist with over 13 years in the industry and I specialize in dreadlocks. Today I am going to demonstrate and show you how to install double-ended dreadlocks. I have my lovely mannequin here that is going to help me with this demonstration. Today I am going to do a full head install. I'm going to leave the bangs out so we can see what it looks like with bangs, and then I'm going to braid in the extensions so the full head is done. This is with synthetic extensions, but you can also do this method with wool extensions. And before we get started today, I wanted to explain the difference between a double-ended dreadlock and a single-ended dreadlock. So this is a double-ended dreadlock. A double-ended one, it's one long dreadlock with a loop in the middle. Now when you install this, you braid in one side and then it's secured with an elastic band or a piece of string. Today we're going to do the elastic band method. Now with a double-ended dreadlock, it does create more fullness, therefore you don't need as many as a single-ended, but keep in mind it is more heavier. So if you have thinner hair, then I would recommend to use a single-ended dreadlock rather than a double-ended dreadlock, because this guy is a bit more weight, and if your hair cannot handle the weight, then that's when you get tension alopecia. Now a single-ended dreadlock, it is a dreadlock with a loop at the top, and then your hair goes through this loop, and then it's braided in and secured with an elastic band. Now with these guys, you're going to be needing more than a double-ended, but these guys are also lightweight. So for someone who has more thinner to medium to thin hair, then you can use these guys. Now I'm also going to talk about the difference between a dreadlock with curly ends compared to just a straight dreadlock, which is what I just showed you. Now a dreadlock with curly ends means that the dread is dreaded right at the root area, and then the ends are left out and in a wave or curl pattern. Now these can be made in many different ways. You can actually make the wave yourself, or you can get hair that has the wave already in it. Now for these guys, you want to make sure how much room you have up at the root section here. Sometimes I have seen extensions where the root comes to about here, which is a little bit hard to install, especially if you have long hair. You want to make sure when you're braiding it in that you want to braid it within this section and you don't want the braid here. Once the braid gets here, it can unravel very, very easily. So please keep in mind when you're purchasing them or if you're making them yourself. These guys also come in single-ended, which is the same thing. You just want to make sure you have enough root at the top here so your hair can braid it. Okay, so one of the main questions is how many dreadlocks do you need for a full head? So today we're working with double-ended dreadlocks. So normally for medium to thick hair, you're going to need about 50 to 60, sometimes 70 if your hair is really thick. If you have more finer hair, at least 35 to 45 you're going to need for a full head. So what kind of supplies do you need for a dreadlock install? Well, the first one is you obviously need your set of dreads. The second one is you're going to need a tail tooth comb. One of these guys. I prefer the ones with a metal tip on it just because it's easier to section the hair. You're going to need clips of any kind just to clip the hair up. You're going to need elastics. Now you're also going to need a spray bottle. My spray bottle at the salon is a mister, and I absolutely love that one because you're not constantly spraying, but this is the one I have here, so this is what I'm going to use. Now I like to wet down my sections before I braid it, just because I find you can get in all those loose ends when the hair is wet compared to when it's dry. Okay, so how do you prep your hair before you install your dreadlocks? So I always recommend to my clients that either the day before or 2 days before, wash your hair with clarifying shampoo and wash it twice. No conditioner and no products. The reason for this is because once you get the extensions, you're not going to be washing your hair right away. So you want to give your scalp a good scrub down with a clarifying shampoo, because a clarifying shampoo takes out all the dirt, debris, product buildup, all of that jazz. And then you don't want to use conditioner, because when you use conditioner, it softens the hair. So especially with double-ended dreadlocks, because I do find those ones you get more slippage than you do with single-ended. If you have conditioner in your hair, they will slip a whole lot easier, and then you'll be finding that your dreadlocks are just coming out. Also, no products, because like I said, you're not going to be washing your hair right away. So if you have any products in your hair, you don't want that to sit in there, because it can irritate your scalp. Now, I do recommend after getting the extensions to wash your dreads every 7 to 10 days. It completely depends on the person. Sometimes people like washing their hair more often. The reason I say this is because when you're washing, and especially with the extra weight of the water, you'll get more tension. So if you want your dreadlocks to last longer, wash every 7 to 10 days. So sectioning, I use this method whether if it's a braid-in install or natural dreadlock install. It is the bricklay method. I will post a picture up here so you can kind of see it. I normally use the bricklay method when I am doing this. The only time I don't is when the client is parting the hair, or if you're installing this on your own where you're parting your hair. Because the last thing you want to do, like if you're parting your hair here and you start bricklaying them all here, your parting section is going to be so messed up. So when you're trying to part your hair, your dreadlocks are not going to go where you want them to go. So when I get up to the bang area, that's where I kind of maneuver it, and I don't do the bricklay as much over here. When you're doing the bricklay method, this just helps with the sectioning, because you don't want there to be just a random line in the middle of your head or on the side of your head, or it just helps the dreadlocks sit better, especially with double-ended dreadlocks, because there is an extra dreadlock. So when you bricklay them, there's just more space in between to have that extra dreadlock come down. Another thing for the sections, especially if you have a set that is multicolored, is you want to be aware of where you're putting the colors, because you don't want to just sporadically put them in and then all of a sudden you have just a huge chunk of color here or a huge chunk of color there, unless it's intentional. Because I am going to leave this bang out, I'm going to section where the bang is first. So I want her parting to kind of be here. I'm not going to do like a full bang out, just because I do want some dreadlocks to come here. Now I have had it on clients where I section literally all of this around the hairline to have this out, and then all of this behind here would be into dreadlocks. Even for like a middle part, a side part, if they have bangs, I normally leave that fringe out. But for today, I'm just going to leave just a little bit of the bang out right here, just because I did cut her with more curtain side bangs. So I have her bangs all sectioned out there. I'm going to be doing a side part. So her hair naturally wants to go this way. So that is one major thing of when you're installing, is you want to go with the flow of the hair. So you see this a lot around the front, around the hairline, and in the crown. Sometimes depending on the client, sometimes I start at the front, sometimes I start at the back. Times where I've started at the front, it's usually when a client has brought in a set that they've previously owned, and I'm not 100% sure that the amount they have is going to do a full head. So I start at the front so that my sections are good in the front, and then in the back I can take a little bit of bigger sections. Today, what we're going to do is I'm going to start in the back, I'm going to work my way up, and then do the bang. Okay, so I'm going to section at the nape of the neck, and this will be my first row. Now if you're doing this yourself, doing the back of your head is going to be a little bit hard. I always suggest having lots of mirrors around you so you can determine your sectioning. So I have my first row down. You can see here. pretty straight. Okay. Now for your sectionings, it all depends on how big the dreadlock is and how thick or thin your hair is. Now, rule of thumb is you always want to make sure the width of the section you take is the same as the dreadlock. So for more thinner dreads, this is especially more common in wool because they make the little micro dreads. You could take smaller sections. You just need to be careful of taking smaller sections because smaller sections, they're tighter. So sometimes it's just too much for your scalp to handle, and it can also be a sensory issue. So rule of thumb is you want to make it as thick of the dreadlock. So I'm going to take it about this thick. Now, I normally do like 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch. It does vary depending on the thickness and thinness of the client. Now, if you have thinner hair, I do suggest taking bigger sections, but you don't want like a huge section in there, because if you take a huge section and you install it, then when the hair's down, you can literally see all the holes and I don't like that look. The hair can withstand more. If the hair can't, then I'd suggest doing a partial head, so then your hair can come down and cover it, or doing a different method, or just not having dreadlocks in general. So I have my section out. I always like to kind of push the other hair out of the way so you don't get your sections and your braids kind of mixed up. Wet down your hair. Now you can do this with your fingers, or you can use this with a comb. Section out. So the dreadlock is going to go right in the middle. And you want to make sure that your strands are thick enough so that they can handle the braid in there, okay? So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, plop that in the middle, flip this up, take my other clip, and clip it in. Take one strand, take the other strand, and then we're just going to braid it in. Now there's plenty of different braiding techniques that you can do. I'm going to go through all the different braiding techniques in a different video. This is just a standard how to install double-ended dreadlocks. So I'm just going to braid this in. And when you do that first section, you want to make sure it is tight. And that your tension is good. And this is why I like working with wet hair, because with dry hair, especially if you have layers in your hair, you're going to get all these little flyaways and it's going to be such a pain to dread in. Now, I do know some people that they use gel to braid it in, or another product or braiding in product. I personally don't like doing that, just because your dreadlocks are going to be in your hair for a while before you wash them. So I am always more about clean hair than putting excess product on your hair, just because you don't want to have that product build up or have it irritate your scalp. Okay, and then once you get to a certain point, you want to make sure your braid is tight, because you can see here I am almost at the end of this. So the length of the hair means everything. So especially if you have longer hair, you want to make sure your braids are really, really tight in there. So this last little hair, what I like to do is I like to ravel it around just to get all those little flyaways. Then I spritz that down with water. And then I secure it with an elastic band. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a different method where you can take a string, and I will go through that on a different video as well. Now, if you have different lengths of hair, sometimes you have to do multiple elastics on. So if you have little extra hair that's coming through, then you could put 1 to 2 more extra elastics on there. Then you unclip it and you put it down. and then you move on to the next. Now, dreadlocks that are especially just made, it is very normal for them to do this because the dreadlock hasn't been worn before. So it is a little bit more stiff. Once the dreadlocks have been worn and they're worn in, then they calm down a little bit. So for the first little bit, I would say for the first couple days, until you kind of wash them really, they kind of stick up. Once you wash them, and they'll tame down. Now, because we're doing bricklay, you want to make sure your sections are somewhat even, because you don't want to like have a nice section and then have a nice section and have a nice section and then realize, well, shit, I have very little hair to get into this section. So you kind of want to map it out in your head while you're doing it. So for this guy, I can get 4 dreadlocks at the nape of her neck. Okay, so same thing, you're gonna spray it down with water. Now, these guys are a mixture of dreadlocks with wavy ends, braids, and just regular dreadlocks. So I'm kind of just doing it sporadically. You want to make sure that you don't have all of your curly ends on one pieces and all of your dreads on the other, so you kind of just want to be mindful as you're installing and kind of map it out in your head. Now, depending on the color of your hair or your client's hair and the color of the dreadlocks, the color of elastics mean everything. Now, I've been in situations where I've ran out of elastics, so I just had to make do. But in a perfect world, you want to make sure you have the right color elastics. So my first row is done, and I'm on to the second row. And this is where you're really going to see that bricklay effect. So when you get around the hairline, especially around the ears, up into the front, it starts to round. So you're going to go with the shape of the head instead of just having it completely straight. So when you do the first section of the bricklay, you want to make sure that, see, my parting's here. And then this section, my parting is going to be here, okay? So we have this section here, and then we have this guy here, and then I'm going for this section, it's pretty much going to be in the middle of these two guys. Now for this set, it is the majority of dreads with wavy ends. I believe there is 15 dreads and braids. So I'm gonna more so sporadically put that up near the kind of middle to top. So I have 2 rows done. I'm gonna move this closer. So you can kind of see these are my sections. So this is what a brick lace section will look like once it's installed in your head. For my next row, I'm going to be doing the sides. And for this is where I talk about how you need to go with the shape of the skull. So I'm going to be rounding out my sections here instead of taking a straight line across. You can kind of see that this here, it kind of angles up. And that's because I don't want like really short sections right around the ear. So I'm gonna pop a dreadlock here and then a dreadlock behind her ear. And this is where you can kind of determine and play around. So because we're leaving her bangs out, I'm actually going to put a actual dreadlock here, not ones with wavy ends, because when her bangs come down, I don't want that to be wonky with the wavy ends, if that makes sense. Now we're getting to the top of the head, and the placement up here is very important because you want to go with the way the hair falls. So most often than not, people at their crown have a lot of whorls and cowlicks, so you kind of want to work with that. So on this mannequin, you can hopefully see there is a whorl right here. So the last thing I want to do is put a dreadlock right here. The reason for that is the hair wants to grow this way. So when the hair wants to grow this way, it's going to be more easier for this dreadlock to come loose and then tangle. Now it all just depends. I've done installs where literally back here has come to a point, but because it's more of a whorl, I'm doing more of a rounded section. Okay, so now we are at the top of the head. So this is where I change from going around the head to taking sections this way. So this is with her bang in. Now, it's very normal for these guys to bunch up What I like to do is I like to wet it down with water, because then that just tames everything down. And then you can see here with the bangs, now I'm going to install the bang and then we're almost done. Okay, so here is the finished look. I did wet her down with water because it does tend to get frizzy, especially with the ones with the curly ends. These guys will typically last 4 to 6 weeks, just depending on how fast your hair grows, and then they're easily removed and then you can reinstall them. If you really like my content and you want to learn more about dreadlocks or anything to do in the dreadlock realm, make sure you subscribe. I will be providing after photos of the finished look in this next clip here.